Now, I've always been a fan of the Star Trek universe. In fact, it was my grandma and grandpa who clued me in on the original series when I was much younger. I have a lot of fond childhood memories of sitting in the living room, glued to the screen, watching something that would unwittingly would play a pivotal role in my growing up. Of course, then came the next generation, and although I enjoyed the series of Jean-Luc Picard and the Enterprise D, what came next would become my go-to show, Deep Space Nine. I wasn't drawn to Deep Space Nine because it was part of the Star Trek universe. There was something about storytelling and acting that made the biggest impact in my teen years. Now, like most other Star Trek episodes, DS9 incorporated a lot of societal issues under the guise of well written plots in a sci fi layout. For instance, DS9 had one of the first televised lesbian kisses in television history in the episode Rejoined. Terry Farrell, who played Jadzia Dax at the time, was quoted as being proud to support the LGBT community as she locked lips with Susanna Thompson, who played opposite of Farrell. Even in 1995, same sex interaction was taboo and frowned upon by many. But for those keeping score, the first lesbian kiss took place on an episode of LA Law back in 1991. The point is that Star Trek has always had a societal impact in its storytelling, and the writing of DS9 seemed to have taken it quite a bit further than just a primetime television show. DS9 often had different character leads, much like the rest of the Star Trek universe prior to the Kelvin timeline. Within those leads were stories of all kinds, ranging from the silly to the serious. And with everyone having such a distinct personality on the show, it felt that it gave the show life beyond what other series had. This is especially true in my favorite episode, in the Pale Moonlight. Now, in this particular episode, the Federation and Klingon Empire were at war with an aggressor from the Gamma Quadrant. The war had been costly, as the Dominion could rebuild ships and clone soldiers faster than the Federation and Klingons could accumulate combined. Captain Sisko, played by the great Avery Brooks, takes it upon himself to bring the Romulans into the war with the Dominion by any means necessary. Failure would mean that the Dominion would rule the Alpha Quadrant under a harsh and brutal regime. By gaining the assistance of one of the most morally gray characters in Star Trek, Garrick, played by the brilliant Andrew Robinson, the two set off on a quest to fake a holodeck transcript of a meeting the Dominion was having discussing attacks against the Romulans. Now, the idea was to present this so called evidence to the Romulan senator to convince them to join the fight, as it would be in their best interest to attack the Dominion before it invades the Romulan territory. However, the entire endeavor is rife with chaos of all kinds. In other words, anything that could go wrong did. Now, by the end, Captain Sisko, a prominent leader and proud Federation officer, found himself committing bribery, being an accessory to murder, lying, and more, all for the sake of bringing the Romulans into the war. It was a righteous and just cause, considering the circumstances, and it goes to show how the line between hero and criminal is thinner than what a lot of people might think. But what would a person do to save billions of lives and prevent the hostile takeover of an entire quadrant of a galaxy? But as Garrick said to comfort Sisko,
That's why you came to me. Isn't it, Captain? Because you knew I could do those things that you weren't capable of doing. Well, it worked. And you'll get what you want. A war between the Romulans and the Dominion. And if your conscience is bothering you, you should soothe it with the knowledge that you may have just saved the entire Alpha Quadrant, and all it cost was the life of one Romulan senator, one criminal, and the self-respect of one Starfleet officer. I don't know about you, but I'd call that a bargain.
despite Garrick's word ringing true to a degree, the actions taken to achieve their objective were almost more than Sisko could take. He was a Starfleet captain, and he held himself to a much higher standard than the arguments of Garrick. However, he eventually came to the realization that Garrick was right about the two of them saving the Alpha Quadrant.
I lied. I cheated. I bribed men to cover the crimes of other men. I am an accessory to murder. But the most damning thing of all, I think I can live with it.
Now, the episode in the Pale Moonlight is all about blurring the lines of morality, especially when you believe your cause is just. But he knew that if he didn't find a way to bring the Romans into the war, all would be lost. The fate of the entire Alpha Quadrant quite literally rested on his shoulders. Now, Deep Space Nine had a lot of highly memorable episodes that delved into a variety of societal and spiritual norms. Although there were a few episodes that just kind of fell flat with an audience.
Ella Moraine. Third chap.
The majority of the episodes were very intriguing, entertaining, and thought provoking. Now, this was in part due to the brilliant writing and some amazing acting by the cast. Of course, this was back before viewers were more interested in explosions, flashing lights, and lens flares. It was difficult to come across that kind of quality writing and acting Deep Space Nine brought to the table. Now, for me, Deep Space Nine showed just how flexible you can be in storytelling, even when broaching a societal taboo. Although much has changed over the last 32 years, this show is still a great standard to analyze regardless of the genre anyone chooses. Character arcs, plot progression, scene development, and integration with other genres makes for a great series. I only hope that my future works are just as impactful for someone as DS9 was for me.
Computer, erase that entire personal log.